Hello. My name is Maura Kessler, and my stepmother used my emergency card to host a dinner for people who pretend I don't exist. She smiled while spending my name, then acted like I should be grateful for being left off the guest list. And you know what's worse? They didn't even hide it. The sound that started it was small, a cheerful ping from my phone that sliced through the quiet like a pebble thrown into still water. I almost didn't look. It was early evening, the hour when the sun slips behind Charleston's rooftops and everything softens. My laptop screen still glowed with half-finished numbers, my wine was warm, and for a moment I thought maybe I could rest. Then curiosity reached for me. I tapped open Instagram. A single photo filled the screen, my stepmother, Valora, in her pearl-colored dress, head tilted back mid-laugh. Across from her, Zinnia, the daughter she never had to struggle for, lifted a crystal glass toward the camera. Candlelight polished their smiles. Lobster tails, truffle risotto, and gold silverware shimmered under the caption, "Family First. Magnolia House Nights." The first comment pinned to the top read, "Thanks to Eleanor for the treat. Truly a blessing. Eleanor Kessler. My legal name." The name printed across the gold-edged emergency card that lived in Valora's wallet. My stomach tightened as though the name itself had turned to metal. I didn't even need to check, but habit won. A few seconds later, my phone vibrated again. Emergency card alert, $862.49 charged at Magnolia House Restaurant. The wine on my tongue soured. I remembered the night 2 years earlier, after my father's funeral, when I handed her that card. She'd been crying in the kitchen, mascara staining the same hands that once wrote my father's condolence thank yous. I'd said softly, just in case things ever get tight. She had nodded, trembling, like a woman grateful beyond words. "You're such a blessing, Maura," she'd whispered. Now that same blessing had turned into an expectation. I sat back on the couch, the glass sweating against my palm. My apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the faint creak of the ceiling fan. The silence didn't comfort, it accused. Every corner of my life felt like a witness that refused to defend me. I opened my budgeting spreadsheet. The numbers didn't lie. Utilities, groceries, gas, all recurring payments linked to that same card. For months, maybe years, I had been the invisible foundation under someone else's comfort. I'd known it, yes. But knowing and seeing were two different pains. This dinner, this celebration that didn't include me, carved something deeper. They had toasted family under chandeliers paid for by my restraint. I scrolled further through the spreadsheet, and the receipts glared back at me. Lavender Ridge Spa, $312. Cellar Bar, $189. Boutique Dress Shop, $547. All recent. All charged to me. It wasn't just theft, it was entitlement polished into ritual. My throat tightened. I wasn't forgotten. I was accounted for. My absence had been budgeted into their joy. I whispered the thought out loud because silence made it heavier. I wasn't forgotten, I said. I was included, as a payment method. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The sound of the city outside drifted through the window, laughter, cars, the distant rhythm of someone else's Friday night. For a second, I imagined being part of it, somewhere warm, where no one used me as an invisible checkbook. The image dissolved quickly, replaced by the glow of my phone. I opened the bank app. The option sat there in gray and blue, freeze card. My thumb hovered over it. If I pressed it, the charade would end. Valora would know I had seen through her. The fallout would be immediate, accusations of selfishness, of being cold, of not understanding family. But if I didn't press it, I was complicit. I would keep underwriting the fantasy of belonging. The cursor blinked on my spreadsheet like a heartbeat. I could almost hear my father's voice, low and tired. "People show who they are when money meets love. Don't look away." I wanted to close my eyes. Instead, I looked closer. The last column on my sheet was labeled purpose. I began to fill it in: groceries, acceptable, utilities, shared necessity, Magnolia House, indulgence. By the end of the list, every entry under Valora's name read pretending. I laughed softly, but it wasn't amusement, it was disbelief trying to breathe. My chest felt tight, as though I'd swallowed something sharp. The phone buzzed again. Another comment on the same post: "Such a generous family. You can feel the love." Love. I exhaled slowly, gently, trying not to let the word cut deeper than it already had. It wasn't love they felt, it was comfort, financed by my inability to say no. Outside, a storm began to move in from the bay, and thunder rolled somewhere far off. I closed the spreadsheet, picked up my glass, and walked to the window. The streetlights below flickered in the wind. A couple walked by holding hands, their laughter rising like music. I felt old, not by years but by repetition. Every pattern in my life circled back to the same quiet sacrifice. I set the glass down and whispered, "It ends here." My thumb moved slowly across the phone screen, hovering over freeze card. I didn't press it yet. Instead, I took a breath, deep and steady. I wasn't ready for the confrontation, not tonight. But something inside me had shifted, a small, silent click, like a lock turning from the inside. I turned off the lamp, letting the room sink into half-darkness. The only light came from the phone in my hand, still glowing with the image of Valora's perfect smile. "If I move now, it's real," I said quietly. "But if I don't, I'm still letting them." The thunder outside rumbled closer, and the screen dimmed to black. My reflection stared back at me, eyes tired, but awake in a new way. The storm broke somewhere over the harbor, and the sound filled the apartment. I didn't flinch. I watched the rain streak across the glass like a reset. Softly, slowly, gently, I set the phone face down. I would let the clock run, just a little longer. But not for them. For me, to feel the shift, to believe I could act on it. The card was still active. But the clock had started. 2 days passed before I made the call. Not because I needed more proof, there was already too much, but because I needed to hear how she'd justify it. I wanted to know how Valora would twist betrayal into virtue and still look herself in the mirror afterward. I wanted to hear the performance. By the time I parked outside her house, the Charleston sky was soft with the kind of light that bruises more than it glows. The sun was dying behind the rooftops, painting the street in orange and gold. The porch stood in perfect symmetry, 2 matching ferns, a new coat of white paint, not a single scuff on the railing. It used to be my father's porch. He'd sit there in the early mornings with a steaming mug of coffee and the newspaper folded neatly beside him. He'd nod to passing neighbors, call them by name, wave at the mailman. He belonged to that street in a way I never did. Now, the porch looked like a showroom, too polished, too staged, like every trace of him had been deliberately sanded away. I stayed in the car and dialed. My hands didn't shake. My breath caught, though, thick and dusty in my chest, as if the air had grown tired of moving. She answered on the second ring. "Maura, darling," she sang, her voice syrupy sweet, as if we were scheduling brunch. "How lovely. We were just talking about you." I didn't smile. "Did you use my emergency card last weekend?" The silence that followed lasted no more than 2 seconds, but it stretched. The kind of silence that bends time, heavy and full of meaning. Then she said, lightly, "Of course. It was Zinnia's celebration. You know how hard she's been working lately." Working? The word almost made me laugh. Working on what? Her angles for social media? Perfecting gratitude in public while draining me in private? "You didn't tell me," I said evenly. My voice surprised me, it didn't tremble. It didn't rise. Valora sighed the way someone sighs when explaining gravity to a child. "Maura, don't make this about you." The words hit harder than they should have. "Don't make this about you." It was the oldest trick in her book. The phrase she used whenever accountability entered the room. She wielded it like perfume, cloying, familiar, poisonous. "I'm not making it about me," I said. "I'm asking why you didn't tell me." Her tone softened, but not kindly, strategically. "Oh, Maura," she said, slow and deliberate, "you've always been so practical. That's what makes you such a blessing to this family. You have no idea how hard it is to keep a household feeling full. You don't have children. You don't know what that takes." I stared through the windshield. The porch light flickered on, timed perfectly with the sunset, automated, thoughtless. She continued, her voice a measured blend of guilt and grace. "I didn't think you'd mind. You're so stable. Honestly, we thought you'd be proud to help. You're the backbone, Maura. Just like your father was." There it was. The knife, wrapped in silk. Pride, she called it. Pride in being the dependable one. Pride in being used. Pride in footing the bill for a family dinner I was never invited to. "You're not the only one grieving," she added, voice dipping low, intimate. Don't hoard your father's legacy, darling. He wanted us all to be okay. I'm just trying to keep us together. A chill settled over me. Not the kind that makes you shiver, but the kind that stills you completely. The kind that says, don't move, or this will break something permanent inside you. And she was right about one thing. I was practical. Practical enough to see that the illusion I'd been clinging to, the one where Valora was thoughtless, not calculated, was dead. I'm going to hang up now, I said quietly. She chuckled. Oh, Maura. Don't be dramatic. I didn't respond. I just pressed end call and watched the red circle blink out, taking her voice with it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of something heavier, recognition. I sat there, hands still on the wheel, staring at the reflection of my own face in the rearview mirror. It didn't look angry. It didn't even look surprised. It looked like someone who had stood in the rain too long and only just realized she was drenched. She called me selfish, I whispered, the words tasting metallic. Not shouted. Not hissed. Just slipped in like a casual truth. As if asking to be informed, asking to be respected, made me the villain in her narrative. I looked up at the house. The perfect porch. The golden light glowing behind gauzy curtains. Her silhouette moved across the window, unbothered, elegant. And I didn't go in. I started the car and drove home through the dark. Each mile peeled something off me, one quiet thread at a time, unraveling a version of myself that had been knotted too tightly around obligation. Later that night, I found myself standing in front of the open closet. The rain had started by then, soft at first, then steadier, tapping against the windows like it wanted to be let in. Inside, behind a box of tangled holiday lights and a winter coat I hadn't worn in years, was the folder. The trust paperwork. I pulled it out, sat cross-legged on the bedroom floor, and spread it open on my lap. My father's handwriting. My own, younger and eager. I traced the ink with my thumb, the day he had made it official. He'd smiled that quiet, proud smile that always made me want to stand taller. You've always been the one who keeps things standing, he said. His name was there beside mine. Until it wasn't. I flipped to the back, and there it was, the updated copy. Valora's name alone at the top. Zinnia listed as secondary. My name gone. Not crossed out. Not replaced. Just erased. As if I had never been in that room. As if my father's trust had been a myth. Outside, the rain thickened. I didn't turn on the light. I sat in the dark, listening to the rhythm against the glass, steady and merciless. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. The ache was quieter than that. A steady hum that lived under my skin, vibrating with truth. This wasn't about money. It was about erasure. They hadn't just stolen what was mine. They had rewritten the story, and I was no longer a character in it. And if I stayed silent, they would keep doing it, again and again, until there was nothing left of me but the version they preferred. I placed the old signature page on top of the pile, closed the folder carefully, and sat there a long time. The rain continued to fall. Some losses don't strike like thunder. They hum, low and constant, until you remember what dignity feels like. And when I finally stood, the folder pressed against my chest, I knew that the silence I'd once called peace had only ever been permission. That night, I stopped giving it. The morning came without asking. Light spilled across the kitchen floor as if it belonged there, but nothing else did. The folder lay open across the island, pages curled slightly from the humidity, corners worn soft from years of being carried, first by my father, and now by me. I stared at the pages as if one might blink and show a different truth. But they didn't. They sat in still defiance, offering nothing but what I already knew. My name was missing. Not scratched out. Not replaced with someone else's. Just gone. The line where my name once was now floated in blank space. As if I had never signed it. As if I had never stood beside him in that office 5 years ago, ink pen trembling slightly in my grip as I leaned into the weight of the promise. That morning had smelled like sandalwood and fresh paper. My father's study always carried that warmth, like old books and quiet certainty. I remember the click of the door behind us, the way he'd said, "Just you and me today." And the way he smiled, not wide, not showy, but the kind that told me I was seen. "It's not about the money," he said, placing the documents in front of me. "It's about protection. You've always been the one who carries weight quietly. This makes sure you don't have to carry alone." He'd guided my hand across the paper, his fingers just above mine, not controlling, but steadying. After we signed, he folded the pen back into its case, and with a softness I didn't understand then, he said, "They'll come for what's easy. Don't let them take what you bled to build." I hadn't known he meant them. Now the ink was still there, his signature crisp, his instructions intact, but the piece of me beside him had vanished like a name washed off glass. I called the estate attorney that afternoon. His name was Whitlock. He sounded younger than I remembered. "Good afternoon, this is Eleanor Kessler. I'm calling regarding a recent update to the Harlan Kessler Trust documents." My voice was steady, practiced. I had rehearsed every word. He pulled the file, confirmed the changes. "Yes, we have the most recent version, submitted last October. Co-signed by Mrs. Dane. It lists Zinnia Mallory as the secondary beneficiary." I paused. Not because I was surprised, but because I needed him to hear the pause. "I never received any notification of those changes," I said. Whitlock cleared his throat. "We didn't receive any objection. In the absence of that, and with signatures from the designated parties, legally, it holds." He said it like it was simple math. 2 signatures. 1 missing. Nothing to contest. "Legally," I repeated. "It holds." "Correct." I ended the call without saying goodbye. Legally, it held. Emotionally, it dissolved. I stood in my kitchen, one hand still gripping the phone, the other flattening the corner of the signature page. So that's how you vanish someone. Not with a scream. Not with a door slammed in your face. But with a form. With a filing. With enough silence to be mistaken for consent. I pulled out the drawer beneath the sink. Inside was the envelope my father left me, handwritten, no return address, sealed with a sticker from one of his crossword books. I opened it again, even though I had read it 100 times. Trust her. She'll know what to do. I hadn't known. I hadn't seen it coming. Not when Valora moved in. Not when she folded her grief into the shape of a perfect widow. Not when Zinnia started calling herself the daughter Dad always needed. I had smiled. I had kept peace. I had paid. And now, even in death, he was being used to sell an illusion. I opened my laptop. Searched my inbox. The notification sat there, buried under newsletters and bank statements. Estate file update, October. The one I hadn't opened. The one I assumed was routine. I clicked it. There it was. A PDF attachment. A paragraph noting the change. The new structure. The absence of my name written in clean Helvetica. I hadn't even been worth a phone call. A storm began to roll across the bay again, soft rumbles pressing against the windows. I didn't move to close them. I let the wind move through the screen like breath through ribs. I wasn't angry yet. Anger would come later. What I felt now was something deeper, like being held underwater, not by force, but by expectation. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote one word at the top. Removed. Then underneath. From dinner. From photos. From inheritance. From memory. My name hadn't just been deleted. It had been overwritten, gently, quietly, the way you erase pencil from an old grocery list. No one cries over a name like that. No one notices the line where it used to be. That night, I sat on the floor with every version of the trust, old, new, annotated, amended. I highlighted discrepancies. Dates. Signatures. Handwriting shifts. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a pattern. I folded the documents into a new folder. Marked it with a post-it, ready for review. My handwriting looked sharp. Angry. But my hands moved slowly. Steadily. Gently. At 6:02 a.m., the next day, my phone buzzed with a charge alert. $1,204.98, Rosewater Bay Resort. I hadn't been invited. But apparently, my card had. I didn't blink. My finger hovered over the alert, not to reread it, but to memorize it. Like engraving a wound before it scars, so there's no mistaking what caused the pain. $1,204.98, Rosewater Bay Resort. They had gone somewhere beautiful. Sunset-colored menus. Oversized white umbrellas. Probably a string quartet in the background, playing something classic and ironic. They had ordered drinks I couldn't pronounce. They had toasted to love, to family, to togetherness, without me. And I paid for it. I opened Instagram. Zinnia's page loaded instantly. There she was, standing on the patio of the Rosewater Bay, wearing a soft peach dress with a slit too high for the occasion and a smile too wide to be real. Behind her, balloons curled in the shape of a 24. Two women flanked her with identical filtered expressions. The caption read, "Surrounded by love." I whispered back, "Surrounded by my money." The sting wasn't in the amount. It was in the erasure. No tag. No thank you. Not even a mention. I was a ghost who funded the living. Scrolling further, I found the reel. Zinnia laughing, champagne popping, a tiered cake being rolled out with gold lettering, "She's golden." The comments beneath it poured in. "Your mom is the classiest woman alive. The way your family shows up? Goals." My name wasn't there. My presence wasn't required. But my card was. I looked down at my own coffee, now cold. I hadn't celebrated my own birthday that year. Or the one before. Last time I tried, I ate leftover takeout and lit a single candle in silence. I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't expected anyone to remember. But I had remembered theirs. And apparently, I had paid for theirs. My phone buzzed again, this time, a voicemail. Not a charge. I hesitated before pressing play. Then Delaney's voice filled the room, shaking something loose inside me. "Maura, I probably shouldn't be calling. But I saw another request come through this morning. Someone's trying to change contact permissions on your father's trust. Again." She paused. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. Her voice cracked slightly. "They're moving things. Quietly. Please. Don't ignore this. Something isn't right." I let the message finish. Then I sat there for a moment, holding the phone in my lap like it was something fragile. Not out of panic. Out of clarity. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a strategy. And I had been cast as the fool who never questioned the script. They weren't just spending my money. They were shifting the walls of the house my father built while telling me I should be grateful for standing outside it. I opened my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I'd titled Emergency Card Transactions, Last 90 Days. It was a working document. But now, it would become a weapon. I created 3 highlight colors. Blue, charges made without permission. Yellow, charges tied to events I wasn't invited to. Red, charges used for appearances, things meant to impress, not survive. Floral deliveries. Designer candles. Event reservations. Luxury makeup. I created a 4th column. I named it Emotional Value Extracted. For every dollar spent, a piece of me was used to fund a version of family I no longer recognized. A version I never belonged to. The red column filled the fastest. I leaned back in the chair, the document glowing on the screen. This was no longer about budgeting. It was about proof. And the kind of pain that doesn't beg to be acknowledged, it proves itself quietly. At the top of the sheet, I typed a new title. Statement of Misuse, Personal Account Abuse by Valora Dane and Zinnia Mallory. Below that, I added. Filed internally, subject to council review. It felt strange to see their names in black and white, under the heading of abuse. But it was accurate. And more than that, it was necessary. Gently, slowly, I started attaching screenshots. Each photo of Zinnia clinking glasses. Each comment praising Valora's generosity. Each time my name was left out while my card was slipped in. They weren't just rewriting history. They were writing me out of it. I wasn't grieving a father anymore. I was grieving the illusion that grief had brought us together. That maybe, through shared loss, we had found something that felt like love. We hadn't. We had found a convenient donor. I scrolled one last time through Zinnia's birthday photos, and then I saw it. A shot someone else had tagged. A group photo, taken at the dinner table. Zinnia in the middle. Her friends flanking both sides. Valora standing at the edge, raising a glass. And on her wrist, my father's watch. The one he never took off. The one he said would always belong to me when the time came. But no one had asked me when that was. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen, the edges of my vision narrowing like a tunnel. This wasn't anger. Not yet. It was preparation. They had taken enough. My name. My silence. My inheritance. My father's belongings. My dignity. It was time to unfreeze more than just the card. The night after I saw the watch in that picture, I couldn't sleep. Every thought had edges. I walked from room to room, bare feet brushing against the cool floor, until I stopped at my desk. The lamp's yellow light softened the stacks of receipts and bank statements that covered the wood like snow. Each paper was a quiet confession of what I had allowed. I started to sort them again, slower this time, more deliberate. Dinner charges, boutique bills, spa invoices, all of them forming a pattern too sharp to ignore. I opened a new document on my laptop and typed the title, Emergency Card Abuse, Evidence Summary. The click of each key sounded heavier than the last. The printer hummed in the corner, spitting out proof I should have demanded years ago. I highlighted transactions, wrote dates beside photos, matched Zinnia's social posts to timestamped charges. The more I connected, the clearer it became. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. When the last page printed, I looked at the mountain of paper and whispered, "This is what happens when you mistake endurance for peace." I sat for a long time, staring at the phone. I didn't want to call her. But silence had been my permission for too long. So I dialed. She picked up on the third ring, voice warm, sugary, rehearsed. "Maura, sweetheart. I was just thinking of you." "Were you?" My voice stayed level. "Then maybe you'll think about this. If you use that card again, I'll let the bank investigate it publicly." A pause. Then laughter. Soft and sharp. "Oh, Maura, don't be dramatic. It's just a little help among family. You've always been the serious one." I swallowed hard. "This isn't help, Valora. It's theft with better lighting." She'd scared. "You make it sound so ugly. He would have wanted us to have this." Something in me went still. "Who?" "Your father, of course. You know how proud he was of us holding this family together." Holding together. What a choice of words for people who had carved me out. Then she said it, the sentence that drained the air from the room. "Actually, I just gave a talk at the ladies' circle. I shared how he always believed in blending our homes. Everyone was so touched." My grip tightened around the phone until my knuckles whitened. She was using him now, turning his voice into a prop for her performance. I didn't speak. She filled the silence anyway. "You should come next time. It would mean a lot to show the world how united we are." United. I ended the call. I sat very still, the lamp flickering above me. My hands ached from holding too much stillness. I reached for the photo on the shelf, my father fixing the porch light, the summer before he got sick. His face half turned, squinting into the sun, smiling in that quiet way of his. Grease on his fingers, a smudge across his cheek. He never gave speeches. He never liked crowds. He believed in working quietly, in showing love by mending what was broken rather than talking about it. I remembered his voice, low and steady as the sound of a wrench turning. "Don't ever let anyone use my name to silence you." I touched the frame gently. "I won't." The air felt different after that, lighter, sharper. I opened my laptop again. Logged into the bank. My fingers moved carefully, deliberately, like performing surgery. I didn't freeze the card right away. Not yet. Instead, I set up alerts, notify me for any purchase over $100 in restaurants, salons, or boutiques. Then I blind copied my attorney, Naomi Creed, on the account summary. Finally, I opened the mobile app. Tap, freeze card. Tap, effective, next Friday, 8:59 p.m. That was the night Valora planned her next dinner. She had sent the event invite to everyone else, the same Magnolia house where it had all started. Let her have her toast. One last time. Let her think I was still asleep. When I closed the laptop, the room went quiet except for the low buzz of the printer cooling. I leaned back, listening to the hum fade like a heartbeat slowing after a long run. I thought of what she'd said about my father, how she twisted his memory to clean the dirt off her own image. The fury didn't rise like fire, it sank, heavy and certain, settling into a place where fear used to live. Near midnight, an email notification blinked on my screen. Forwarded by a friend from town. The subject line read, "Upcoming guest speaker, Widows of Grace Luncheon." I opened it. Valora's photo filled the page, chin lifted, eyes serene. The caption beneath made my stomach twist. "Legacy, love, and letting go, the Kessler philosophy." And at the bottom, in elegant script. Sponsored by the Harlan Kessler Foundation. The foundation hadn't existed since the year he died. It had been dissolved, by me. The bank paperwork sat in a file drawer 10 feet away. She had revived it, on paper, to build her own halo. I closed the laptop slowly. The fury this time was calm, clean, precise. She could lie to the church ladies. She could polish my father's ghost until it gleamed. But this time, when the spotlight turned on her, it would also illuminate the cracks. I whispered into the dark, "Enjoy your speech, Valora. You've mistaken kindness for weakness one too many times." I walked to the window. The city was quiet, except for the soft hum of tires on wet pavement. Somewhere out there, she was probably sitting at her vanity, rehearsing her smile in the mirror, believing she had already won. But she didn't know the freeze timer had started. She didn't know every step she took now left a record. I stood there for a long time, letting the air move against my face, gentle and cool. Slowly, softly, I let the quiet fill me instead of the anger. Because this wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about balance. I turned off the light, letting the darkness settle like truth. Valora's voice had been quiet the day she asked me to stop by. She claimed she'd found some old tax papers of Dad's, things she thought I might need. I almost didn't go. But something about the way she said, "It's probably nothing," had a little too much confidence behind it. I parked behind her silver SUV, noting the fresh mulch along the flower beds. Valora always kept the outside neat, appearances were everything to her. But no amount of landscaping could hide the stench of rot that lived just behind her walls. Inside, the air smelled of citrus cleaner and something overly sweet, maybe the artificial kind that comes from plug-ins she lined around the hall. It never smelled like that when Dad lived here. Back then, it was cedar, leather, coffee. Things that felt like him. I stepped into the living room, glancing toward the fireplace mantel out of habit. It was gone. The porcelain music box. My mother's. Passed down to me when I turned 12. Hand-painted, rose-shaped lid, with a faint crack across one side. It had never been worth much in money, but everything to me in memory. She used to wind it up while brushing my hair, letting it play its gentle tune while I fought to stay still. My chest tightened. I walked over slowly, as if maybe I'd missed it, maybe Valora had just moved it for cleaning. But the space was empty. No dust ring. No sign it had ever been there. Just gone. I forced myself to stay calm, to move through the room without making noise. She was in the kitchen, humming. I followed the familiar creak of the floor toward Dad's old office, now her home workspace. It wasn't locked. I shouldn't have opened the drawer, but I did. Inside was a crumpled slip of paper, pink around the edges. I smoothed it out slowly. Charleston pawn and gift. Item, antique porcelain music box, rose detail. Initials, ikappa. Amount received, $45. I sat down in his chair, suddenly lightheaded. Not because of the money, $45 wouldn't cover a single dinner they'd charged to my name. No, what knocked the air out of me was the fact that she hadn't even thought I'd notice. That she'd pawned it with the kind of casual certainty that assumed I would never come looking. That I didn't remember what love felt like. She didn't just sell the box, I whispered. She sold the part of me that remembered being loved. The humming from the kitchen continued. I folded the receipt carefully, slid it into my coat pocket, and walked into the kitchen like nothing had changed. Valora was arranging tulips into a glass vase, yellow, her favorite. Her sleeves were rolled up, and she smiled when she saw me. "There you are. Coffee?" I pulled the slip from my pocket and placed it gently on the marble counter. She glanced down at it, her expression unchanged. "Oh, that old thing? I thought it was junk." I didn't blink. "It was my mother's." She shrugged. "And now it helped pay for dinner. See? Still serving the family." My hands didn't move, but something inside me did. "You're not my family," I said. That made her pause. Her smile faltered, lips pressed thin. She turned fully to face me. "You really think you matter more than what we've built?" she said, voice sharp now. "You think your father loved you more than he loved me?" "I know he did." Her breath caught. Her eyes darkened. The next movement happened faster than thought. She picked up the wine glass beside her, filled to the brim, and flung it with all the force her small frame could muster. I heard it before I felt it. The shatter. The sting. The warmth trailing down my cheek. I didn't fall. I didn't flinch. I reached for the nearest linen napkin, one of Dad's, embroidered with his initials, and pressed it gently against my face. The cut was shallow, but the message was deep. Valora's hand shook slightly. She looked more shocked than I did. "You think you're the victim here," she snapped. "You've always been the cold one. You never wanted this family. You're just bitter because I made something he was proud of. I pulled out my phone. Slowly. Calmly. I snapped a photo of my reflection in the microwave door, blood, glass shards at my feet, her hand still holding the base of the broken stem. No screaming. No accusations. Just evidence. I turned toward the front door. You'll regret this, she called after me. I didn't answer. In the car, I kept one hand on the wheel, the other holding the napkin in place. The bleeding had mostly stopped by the time I pulled into my apartment lot. But the bruise was already blooming. Back home, I walked to the bathroom. Removed my blouse. Looked at myself in the mirror, not at the wound, but at the person wearing it. I'm not cold, I said softly. I'm just done. I sat down at my desk and opened a new email to Naomi Creed. Subject, legal separation of trust accounts plus assault report. Attached, photo evidence. Medical form from urgent care. Copy of pawn receipt. In the body, I wrote only this. The last line's been crossed. I'm ready. I hit send. Then I turned off the screen. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. I hadn't eaten all day. Not because of nerves would have implied doubt, uncertainty. But there was no trembling in my hands, no second-guessing my decision. This wasn't fear. This was something colder. Something settled. Like knowing exactly how to grip the doorknob of a house you're no longer welcome in, and exactly how much pressure it takes to turn. At 6:43 p.m., I pulled into the private lot behind the Magnolia House, a place where linen napkins matched the wine list, where voices never rose above piano notes, and where everything was built to look elegant no matter what was buried beneath the surface. I stepped out slowly, adjusting the sleeve of my blazer with one hand, the other gripping my purse like a statement. Inside wasn't just lipstick or car keys. It held a binder. Thick, yes, but not heavy. It carried no vengeance, no fire. Just facts. Just records. History, labeled and time-stamped. I entered through the side door, as instructed on the RSVP I hadn't sent but was expected to honor anyway. I was early, on purpose. 10 minutes to ground myself. 10 minutes to position. The private dining room was already set. Candles flickered in glass cylinders. The table gleamed beneath soft lighting. A jazz version of Blue Skies floated from hidden speakers. It was all so carefully curated, like every moment leading to this had been part of someone else's script. I chose my seat with care, not at the head of the table, and not at the edge. Not dramatic, but visible. Strategic. I had learned over the years that the middle seat is where you're least expected to speak, but hardest to ignore when you do. That was always Valora's word for me when truth came too close. Don't be dramatic, Maura. She said it when I cried after Mom died. She said it when Dad was fading, and I asked if Zinnia even knew how bad it had gotten. She said it again, just last week, when I told her I was done being quiet. Not this time. I sat, slowly unzipping my purse. Just enough to see the color-coded tabs inside the binder. The label on the front read, Statement of Use, Eleanor Kessler Emergency Account, 90 days. Each page inside was documented. Verified. Cross-referenced with screenshots, receipts, digital records. It wasn't an attack. It was a timeline. At 6:56 p.m., they arrived. Valora, flawless in cream silk, her smile practiced, her pearls shining under the light. Zinnia, beside her, in blush pink. Always the golden daughter. The one who learned early how to make obedience look effortless. Grayson came in behind them, distracted, tugging at the edge of a cufflink, scanning the room like he didn't want to land anywhere. No one acknowledged me. They simply sat, adjusted their napkins, and began talking as if I were part of the decor, an architectural inconvenience they couldn't quite design out of the room. Small talk floated through the air. Glassware clinked. Laughter curled around false sentiment. Then, as if it were scripted, which I'm sure it had been, Valora stood, raising her glass of sparkling wine. To chosen family, she said. And to remembering those who taught us the meaning of generosity. Her eyes flicked to me. Just for a second. Like ticking off a box on a guest list. I didn't lift my glass. I didn't smile. I sipped my water, eyes steady, hands still. They toasted to legacy, but the one I'd built had been erased, repackaged, spent without my consent. The dessert came, a delicate chocolate tower dusted in edible gold. No one touched it. That's when the waiter approached. Polite. Professional. He stopped beside Valora. She reached into her clutch without hesitation, producing a card like muscle memory. She handed it over without looking. He took it, paused. Then leaned in and whispered something. Valora's head tilted. Excuse me? The waiter straightened. I'm sorry, ma'am. This card has been declined. The silence was instant. Zinnia's fork hovered in midair. Grayson froze completely. Even the jazz stopped, at least, it felt that way. Valora let out a light, artificial laugh. That must be a mistake. I stood. Calm. Controlled. From my purse, I pulled out the binder. I set it down on the table beside the untouched dessert, the spine facing them. This account, I said, voice even, has covered more than $11,000 in non-emergency charges over the last 90 days. I let the words settle. Then I looked at each of them. Valora, who wore composure like it was couture. Zinnia, who knew how to disappear behind charm. Grayson, who always claimed ignorance like it was integrity. Including this meal. I slid the binder forward. The sound of it moving across linen was louder than anything anyone said. Inside, you'll find receipts. Digital signatures. Time-stamped photos. I turned my eyes to Zinnia. Yours, mostly. Valora didn't reach for it. She stared at the cover like it might catch fire. What is this supposed to mean? She asked. Her voice had dropped. No longer syrupy. Just sharp. It means I was never family, I said. I was funding the illusion of one. Zinnia reached for the binder. I stopped her. My hand hovered above hers. Don't, I said. You didn't earn this either. No one moved. The waiter still stood awkwardly to the side, checkbook in hand. Grayson cleared his throat, reached slowly for his wallet. I didn't stay to see who paid. I walked out, not in anger. In certainty. I had delivered the truth. Not with volume. Not with emotion. With proof. Outside, the air was crisp. The door shut behind me with no resistance. And for the first time in months, I didn't look back. I didn't need applause. I needed precision. And I had found it. The morning came, but rest hadn't followed. The apartment was still. Not calm, just untouched. My kitchen remained dim, the light outside too slow to crawl over the neighboring rooftops. I sat at the table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had gone cold before I remembered I'd even poured it. My cheek throbbed with that dull, insistent ache, a pulse beneath the skin where the bruise had darkened overnight. The night before hadn't ended with shouting. No storm, no slammed doors. It was worse than that. The air had thickened with evidence, not accusation. What unfolded played more like a slow-burn courtroom drama than a fight. No judge, no defense, just receipts, silent eyes, and the hollow kind of truth that empties a room. I learned long ago that silence can hit harder than rage. And last night, it had. I opened my laptop. My fingers moved slowly, not from hesitation, but from precision. Every keystroke mattered. The subject line formed like a quiet verdict. Request for trust separation plus legal action, assault and financial misuse. To Naomi Creed. Attachments. PDF copy of the financial binder. Photo of my cheek, swelling visible, a deepening bruise. Urgent care report. Receipt from the pawn shop, for the porcelain box. I stared at the cursor for a moment before typing one final sentence in the body of the email. I don't want revenge. I want removal. And then, I hit send. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing dry leaves against the windows. The branches tapped gently, as if checking whether I was awake. I was. Fully. That afternoon, I folded laundry in the living room, the rhythm almost meditative, until my phone lit up with a series of alerts, notifications I hadn't expected. A clip had surfaced online. Just 20 seconds. A shaky recording from the dinner. I'm sorry, ma'am. This card has been declined. The room went still on screen. The camera caught it, Valora's face mid-smile. A drop so quick it looked choreographed. The kind of expression you can't recover from when you forget someone might be recording. The comment section was already blooming beneath it. Wait, wasn't that her daughter's card? You throw a gala and forget to pay for it? This is what entitlement looks like. I didn't smile. I didn't repost. I just watched as the truth wrapped itself in digital vines, climbing steadily. Some people call it justice. I call it a receipt. Scene shift, Valora's kitchen. Robe wrinkled, coffee untouched, phone buzzing nonstop. Not that she answered. There wasn't a spin polished enough for this. Grayson had left 2 voicemails. Neither offered comfort. Zinnia texted twice. Handle this. Then? This is on you, Mom. I didn't need to be in that room to know what it felt like. I'd lived in that kind of silence. Where judgment doesn't speak, it just turns its back. By early evening, Naomi replied. Her email was short. Efficient. Law without apology. We've initiated a formal investigation with the bank and the trust. You are now designated as the financial monitor. Valora Dane's access has been suspended. Zinnia Calloway's authorizations revoked. We've begun restructuring your late father's distribution plan per the original agreement. No flair. No condolences. Just order restored where disorder had masqueraded as tradition. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like someone finally cleaning the glass after years of pretending it was clear. That night, I heard the knock. I didn't flinch. I opened the door halfway. Valora stood there. No pearls. No pressed blouse. Just a gray sweater that hung too loose at the shoulders, her arms folded across her chest like armor she no longer knew how to wear. Her gaze wavered. Not quite landing on mine. We can fix this, she said softly. We don't need lawyers. I held the door but didn't move. You've used that line before, I said. Right before you took something else from me. Her lips parted, but no polished phrase followed. No script. No spin. What about your father's legacy, she asked. Not demanding. Pleading. I stepped outside and let the door close behind me. I'm honoring it, I said. You're marketing it. She blinked. Eyes glossy, mouth slightly open, but she said nothing. I didn't wait. I walked past her, down the steps, into the cool night. No one followed. The next morning, something told me to check the mailbox. Inside was a plain white envelope. My name handwritten in a familiar cursive, neat, practiced, like the thank you notes Valora used to send on my behalf. I opened it slowly, under the morning sun. Inside, one line. I didn't mean to hurt you. No signature. No address. Just that. I stood there for a moment, then walked it back inside, placed it on top of the recycling pile. Because it was never about whether she meant to hurt me. She did. And now, that hurt no longer lived in me. It lived outside, on paper, in files, in statements, in silence that was no longer mine to bear. Healing doesn't wait for apologies. It builds boundaries. I sat by the window with a fresh cup of coffee, the steam rising in delicate spirals again. The bruise on my cheek had begun to fade, but not disappear. It wasn't there to shame me. It was there to remind me what I would never tolerate again. I didn't need Valora's understanding. Or her redemption arc. I didn't need to be welcomed back. Because I had rewritten the terms. And the truth didn't need shouting. It needed documenting. If you've ever had to step away from a family that confused control with care. I see you. Tell me what helped you let go. Or just say, I'm here. And if this story resonated, subscribe. Quiet strength isn't the absence of pain. It's the refusal to carry it for someone else. 2 weeks passed before I noticed that the quiet didn't bother me anymore. The stillness had shape now. It wasn't emptiness, it was space I finally owned. No alerts. No demands. No one's shadow reaching through the walls of my apartment. Late afternoon sunlight drifted through the blinds as I watered the plants along my windowsill. Their leaves glistened, heavy with new growth. I folded laundry. Paid bills. Sent a donation to a scholarship fund in my father's name. It wasn't grand, but it was real, something good that carried his name without being misused. The mail arrived in a soft shuffle against the door. A small envelope sat on top, my name written in a familiar careful script. I recognized Delaney's handwriting immediately. I opened it standing by the sink, tearing the flap neatly. Inside was a single photograph. My father, Harlan, in his worn denim shirt, smiling shyly at the camera. In his hands, a small gift box wrapped in blue paper. On the back of the photo, his handwriting curved steady as always, for E. You've carried enough. This is yours. I sat down slowly. My throat tightened as if memory itself had weight. The gift box, it was the same porcelain music box Valora had pawned for $45. The one she claimed was junk. He had meant it for me. Not as an inheritance, not as a prize, but as something simple, proof that he saw me. And she'd intercepted it. Hidden it. Sold it. For a long time, I just sat there, the picture trembling slightly between my fingers. Then I grabbed my coat. The pawn shop was only a few blocks away, tucked behind a laundromat that always smelled faintly of detergent and damp hope. The bell over the door chimed when I walked in. The same clerk from before looked up, recognition flickering across his face. "I was hoping you'd come back," he said. "It's waiting in the back." No one came for it. He disappeared behind the curtain and returned carrying a small box wrapped in tissue paper. When he set it on the counter, I didn't move for a moment. I could feel the history pulsing through the paper like a heartbeat. When I unwrapped it, the soft painted roses appeared, slightly chipped, edges dulled with time. I wound it once. The song played, faint but steady. The same lullaby my mother used to hum when storms rattled the windows. Inside, folded beneath the velvet lining, was a note I hadn't known existed. My father's handwriting again. "They won't see your worth until they need it. But you already know. Don't sell that." I closed my eyes. The melody ended with a soft click. I wasn't crying. There wasn't anything left to cry about. What was stolen had been returned, not by chance, but by persistence. I carried the box home, holding it carefully, as if the air might bruise it. Evening fell by the time I reached my apartment. I placed the music box on the kitchen counter, turned on the kettle, and let the sound of boiling water fill the silence. The room felt different, lighter. The phone buzzed once on the table. A text from Zinnia. "Mom's moving in with Aunt Marla. Dad cut her off. Thought you should know." Another followed seconds later. "For what it's worth," she cried. "A lot." I stared at the words for a long moment. Then I deleted the message. Not out of anger. Just closure. Some stories end quietly, not with forgiveness, but with absence. Later that night, I placed the porcelain box on the shelf next to the framed deed now bearing only my name. I lit a single candle, its light flickering across the brass letters of Kessler. "My father died once," I whispered. "I'm not going to bury myself alongside him." The flame moved gently, almost as if agreeing. I sat for a while, letting the quiet hum around me. The kind of quiet that heals, not hides. The kind of quiet where breathing finally feels like a choice. When I stepped out onto the porch, the air smelled of rain again, fresh, not heavy. I looked up at the sky and thought of him, not as loss, but as something I carried forward. Down the street, someone walked by, slowed, and glanced at me. "You're the one from that dinner video," they said, smiling awkwardly. I returned the smile. I was. But not anymore. They nodded politely and kept walking. I stayed there, barefoot on the porch, listening to the soft patter of rain against the leaves. For once, I didn't rush back inside to close the door. I left it unlocked, wide enough for air and light, but not for ghosts. Sometimes justice doesn't knock. It waits until you stop answering the wrong doors. I breathed deeply, softly, and let the rain keep time with my heartbeat. Sometimes the people who call you family will test how much of yourself you're willing to give, until there's nothing left to take. But the real strength? It's in knowing when to stop giving. Have you ever had to walk away from people who kept calling it love, but used you like a lifeline? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe for more true-to-life stories of quiet strength, deep betrayal, and the kind of healing that doesn't need permission.